Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Sherrie Peif, a must-read journalist whose work appears at CompleteColorado.com, covering some of the most important stories in Colorado. Well, Sherrie, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Yeah, you too, Brandon. Happy New Year. I've always enjoyed being on.
Well, Colorado State Legislature has many members who are serving that were not voted in by the people, at least initially. Now, Sherrie, you've written about these vacancy appointments in which a small group of party insiders select a replacement for an outgoing legislator. Although these vacancy appointments do get a lot of attention, there's an aspect that you covered in your recent article that most people might not be aware of. Sherrie, can you tell us about what happened with the Shannon Bird resignation and why the timing of this vacancy is so controversial?
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of background. This was something that has come up a couple of times now in recent years because um, when the 2025 legislative session started last year, out of the 100 lawmakers that were at the state capitol, nearly 24 of those had been appointed. And the year before that, there were 30, maybe 31 that had been appointed. And out of those 30 in 2024, only three of those were Republicans. The rest of them were Democrats. So this has been going on for a while. And last year, they passed a new law that had some things to do with transparency in these appointments and, supposedly trying to tighten down on the vacancy committee rule and how vacancies work. But clearly, as with everything else, as with Tabor and everything else, the Democrats are finding loopholes to these laws. And so Shannon Bird, of course, announced that she wanted to run for Congressional District 8, which is the seat that's currently held by Gabe Evans. Shannon is a Democrat. She serves as a representative in the House of Representatives in Colorado. And she announced that last fall, sometime last fall. But then late last year, she came out and said, I really need to make sure that all of my constituents in District 8 are getting my full attention on my campaign. They deserve my full attention. So I'm going to step down on January 5th. Okay, not January 4th, not January 6th, not tomorrow when the session starts, but January 5th. Because she believes it's only fair to her constituents in both her House district and District 8 to have full representation of their elected officials. Okay. Well, we couldn't figure out why January 5th. When what's her face in Congress stepped down and declared what day she was stepping down, that has everything to do with a pension. That has to do with if I don't step down until this day, I can continue to draw taxpayer money for the rest of my life. But that's not the case in Colorado. So we could not figure out why this would be the case. So I started poking around and asking some people and finally got a very up and honest answer from one of the current senators that said, well, yeah, because if she doesn't step down until the 5th of January, her replacement is now not confined to the Colorado term limit laws. I'm like, what do you mean? Because Colorado law says that a House of Representatives member can only serve four consecutive 2-year terms of office. And that would be 8 years, right? Well, there's another Colorado law that says if you're appointed to a position in the state legislature and you don't serve more than half of that, then what you do serve doesn't count. Okay. So in that instance, with Shannon Bird, who already served, most common sense people would think half of the legislative session, which is 2 years, would be one session, correct? I mean, wouldn't that be what you would think? If you served one session, you've served a half. Well, that's not how it works. Several years ago, this happened and they took it to court, and the judge ruled that 50% plus 1 day is from the day one of the first regular session of a General Assembly to the very last day of the second session of a General Assembly is the full length of the term. So more than half would be 50% of those days, which is what, 700, and I did the math in my story, but 700 and some odd days divided by 2 plus 1. Well, January 5th makes it so whomever is appointed, remember the word appointed, not elected, not to do her constituents justice and get the fairness that the elected, deserve, or the electors deserve, but whomever's appointed to her position won't serve more than half. So now the woman or the man who has been appointed to replace her is now only going to serve less than half. So he's going to serve an entire session, but less than half of a term, the entire session. And then at the end of the year, he can run for reelection, but he can run for reelection 4 more times. So at the end of the day, he's going to get to serve 9 years if that district so decides to elect him every single time he runs for reelection. He's going to get to serve 9 sessions instead of the 8 that is under Colorado law. So she timed that intentionally so that he would be an incumbent going into the election and be able to serve 4 full terms.
Wow. I mean, such trickery there. There's already so much controversy and so much public outcry over these vacancy appointments. To really have, the gall, I don't know a better word to say, to do this, to say, hey, listen, I'm timing this, I'm playing this little game here, and we're giving this person, this party insider, the opportunity to spend even more time in the legislature without necessarily the vote of the people. I mean, or without, being chosen by the public at large, instead just by these party insiders. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, and it shows how devious politics can be sometimes, right?
Well, and it's literally a game of musical chairs, because if you look at the history of this for the Democrats, a couple of years ago there were 2 Democrat legislators that were elected in November to serve, and then stepped down immediately after the election to take different positions. So the people voted for this person, thinking this person was going to serve for 2 years. But then a group of party insiders, in some cases, we're talking 15 people, sometimes even less, get together and go, we want this person to serve. So you just went through an entire election, elected 2 people, and immediately after the election, they stepped down. And rather than the 20,000 people that elected them, you're now going to get 15 people to appoint somebody else to serve the next 2 years. So you basically have, somebody serving that was not elected by the general population. And this happens a lot. And I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that this is what happened in House District 50 last year, or with the Ryan Gonzalez campaign. I still say Mary Young ran for that office because Democrats were convinced that she was the only one that could beat Ryan Gonzalez, and that because we all know her health had been failing her. And I mean, she had passed out at one event in public in Greeley. Now you see where Dave Young has stepped away from his role, or his desire in Congressional District 8 because of a family health member, which we're all assuming is Mary. And God bless her. And I hope she's, I don't speak ill of her illness, but it was whisper campaign going on inside the Democrat Party that Mary Young was going to run against Ryan Gonzalez because she was the only one that could beat him. And then the minute she won, she would step down for whatever reason, and Democrats would appoint somebody who could then fulfill the rest of those 2 years. This happens all the time. And we've seen it now with Faith Winter. God bless her. I'm sorry for her loss. That being said, rather than go back to the voters, what did they do? And rather than even appoint somebody from outside of the legislature, what did they do? They appointed a current sitting House member to take the place of Faith Winter in the Senate. And the person that they appointed in the House is currently, and I keep forgetting which one is which. Is it Nigel, or who's
Yeah,
replacing?
Nigel is Lindstedt.
Okay, so Nigel is now replacing Lindstedt in the House. Well, Nigel is on the Broomfield City Council, those nonpartisan races. He is now a Democrat in the state House. So his Broomfield City Council position is now open. So guess what? That Broomfield City Council position is now going to be appointed by a nonpartisan group of of people on the Broomfield City Council that we all know is Democrat controlled, they're going to appoint somebody to replace him. Same goes for Shannon Bird, the woman who's replacing Shannon Bird. We just looked up. She's currently the president of the nonpartisan Adams Five-Star School Board. She's going to have to step down. So now somebody's going to get to become president of the school board, and the school board in Adams 12, which is one of the most liberal school boards in the state of Colorado. I've been covering education in this state for over 30 years, is going to appoint somebody to replace her. So it's just this constant trickle down effect. And this is how Democrats have taken over Colorado, is with these appointments and these shuffling of the musical chairs and the finding the loopholes in all of the laws. And it just happens over and over and over.
It's absolutely crazy. And I can't help but think that when we look at the list of people who are appointed, it's some of the most extreme members of the Democratic caucus, at least in my opinion. And I think most people would agree with that. I mean, you're talking about Steve Woodrow, Lorena Garcia, Andrew Bosnecker, like these people who are, sponsoring some of the most extreme far left legislation Colorado's seen in recent years. And it's so interesting because, these people get in there appointed, like you said, by party insiders. They didn't really have to go to reach out across the aisle to voters in the district, right? They didn't have to court unaffiliated voters, talk to Republican constituents, and really try and build the community support behind them. All they needed was that small group of people, and that not it's not necessarily a smoke-filled room these days, but that's kind of the image I think that people might have of this dark little smoke-filled room in the back of some place, where these people are picking and choosing who's going to serve. And then they come forward and they bring this stuff. I mean, what do you think, Sherrie, in terms of the makeup, the composition of our state legislature? What role has vacancy appointments played in really, shifting that ideology?
Well, I think you see it in the, like you just said, in the people that are getting appointed, but you also see it in the very far radical left wing progressives of the Colorado Democrat Party can't get these people elected. And you see that you can't get these people elected through the general population. And you see that because you saw Elizabeth Epps lose a primary. You saw who was the other legislator that lost?
Tim Hernandez.
Tim Hernandez lost a primary. You watched Tay Anderson lose a seat on the Denver school board. The far left wing of the Colorado Democrat Party cannot get these people elected by the general electorate, because Colorado, despite the fact that it is as blue as it gets, I say this, I think every time I come on your show, it's still purple. Because when you put conservative policy before the voters of Colorado, they tend to vote it in. But when you put people before the state of Colorado, they vote in these Democrats. Well, I think it's because these people like Elizabeth Epps and Tim Hernandez and Tay Anderson cannot get elected by the general electorate. This is how the left wing is getting these radical progressives in office, is through these small insider party appointments. When people step down, it's how they get them replaced. And that's the only way they can get them in, because it's proving over and over again that even in the most socialist progressive parts of Colorado, you can't get these people elected.
Well, yeah, and just you mentioned this Kenny, and I apologize for not being able to say his name correctly, Kenny Negin. Who's taking this House District 33. Representative Lindstedt, as you said, took Faith Winter's seat in the Senate. I mean, so this guy is as party insider as it gets, if you ask me. Former executive assistant to Colorado's lieutenant governor, currently works at the Colorado Department of Revenue in the new sports gambling division or office there. And of course, I looked at his Facebook page before we started recording this, and he claims, the woman in Minnesota was killed in cold blood. He's celebrating the swearing in of the New York Mayor Zohan Mandami. I mean, I didn't go further than that, but it's like, my goodness, this is the kind of people that get picked by party insiders. They're the people who are the most dedicated members of the party, are probably the more progressive ones, right? I mean, they're the ones who show up at those meetings every month, who get involved, who are part of this vacancy committee. It's not like just a random assortment of people in the community. It's like these people are dedicated to the
Right.
Democratic Party, and often it's because of that ideology for a lot of them, I'm sure, right?
Right. Well, go back to working at Complete Colorado. Complete Colorado is a subsidiary of the Independence Institute and John Caldera. And, Kathleen Chandler is at the Independence Institute, and she's always done these local government training sessions that we go around. Um, and I go back to something that John has said, forever in a day. People have got to start paying attention to their local offices because, and these current replacements that I just highlighted with the Adams 12 5-star school board president and the Broomfield City Council member are two very brand new examples of why local government and who you elect matters so much. I've said it before. There is no such thing as a nonpartisan race. I don't care who you are. You have a philosophy and you donate to somebody or you support somebody or you do something on a philosophical level. So if people, this is how Democrats have taken over Colorado. They run for school board, they run for county commission or for city council. They get on the planning commission, they get on all of the local advisory boards to their city council, and they work their way up and they get to the point in these nonpartisan races like these two replacements are now for Lindstadt and Bird. And the party looks at them and goes, oh, they've done their dues, they've paid their time, now it's time to get them out of those nonpartisan races and start moving them in other places. That is why local government is so important, and people have got to start paying more attention to what's going on in their cities and their school boards and their town councils more than they pay attention to these state offices, because it's a hierarchy. It's a whose turn is it, and that's the way it's going to continue to be until they start taking back those local boards.
That's such a great point. Such a great point. And I feel like on the left side, the Democratic machine has this organization and this structure where they recruit candidates, they train them, and they get them into these local positions and kind of, for lack of a better word, groom them, but kind of identify who can be those leaders. And it's really interesting to see that whole process play out. And then it all comes to fruition with these vacancy appointments. And now Kenny and then Lori, which I want to bring up briefly, the two replacements here, the two new ones that are going to be sworn in on Wednesday tomorrow when we're recording this, January 14th. Um, their time has come and now they're going to be incumbents. So come the next election, yeah, sure, maybe they got to run in 2026 under the new law or whatever it is, that maybe the term was up already. But anyways, they have that name recognition. They can build a name for themselves during this legislative session. They get to meet with lobbyists. They get to be familiar with all the people in the caucus, show up at all the fundraisers, all the 527 events, everything, and start building their campaign coffers as a legislator already sitting going into the election. So they have a huge advantage going into November, as opposed to if they were just running organically as a Broomfield City Council member, as a school board member. It's a lot different when you're already in there and then running for office. I mean, so it's crazy how these vacancy appointments give these people this incumbent kind of advantage, right?
Well, and on the flip side of that too, or on the continuing that conversation, I mean, excuse me, I can guarantee you neither one of these two new legislators will have their name on anything controversial. They won't be sitting on any major boards or committees. They won't have their name on anything controversial because we both know that so many of the electorate out there vote based on a letter behind somebody's name. And so if they were to be on anything controversial or anything, that got Elizabeth Epps and everybody else kicked out of office, then it would be much harder to run for reelection. So this year is going to be spent doing exactly what you just said. This year is going to be spent raising money, building those coffers, getting that name recognition, and laying low. And just knowing that when it comes, the average uneducated voter, because I hate to say it, and I'm sorry, but there are more uneducated voters out there than there are educated voters. When it comes time for election at the end of this year, those voters who only vote because either there's a D or an R behind somebody's name, or who go, well, I know this person was appointed, but I trust my party because my party has always come through for me. I'm going to go ahead and elect them. Then once they get in next session, and now they're in for 2 years, then they're going to start doing, and I'm holding to, excuse me, I'm holding to the belief that this session is going to be, I know a lot of people are saying it's going to be a scary session, but I'm holding to the belief that it's going to be one of the most lame duck sessions that we've had in the last 8 years. And that's because we have a governor who, for whatever reason, is wanting to pretend that he's moving to the middle with a lot of the things that he's been doing lately. And so I don't think this session is going to be as controversial as the past few sessions have been. But God help Colorado if Michael Bennet wins the office or Phil Weiser wins the office. The next 4 years, if we don't get a Republican governor to get the Democrats under control in the state legislature, there is going to be nothing but problems. Because I can guarantee you, charter schools in this state, no matter what anybody wants to say, charter schools in this state have been relatively unscathed the last 8 years because we have a governor who does support school choice. And I don't care what that's another argument for another day. It's a fact. He supports school choice. You get Bennet or Weiser in there, and I can guarantee you in the next 8 years or 4 years, charter schools will not look anything like they look like right now. And that's when these new appointments are going to start doing more damage, not this year. So, I mean, that's part of that other grooming thing that you're talking about. They're grooming them, getting them ready for a new governor that everybody, that whole party is hoping is going to be another Democrat. God help Colorado if it is, because the two that are running, yeah, there's going to be trouble.
Well, and I really appreciate the you brought up that legislation piece, right? Because then these newly appointed legislators can go this election and say, "Hey, I sponsored this bill that, gave money to firefighters or to schools or whatever, like this
I
non-controversial."
co-sponsored it with this Republican. I co-sponsored it with that Republican, Yeah.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
then they get to use this legislative session as a campaign tool based on what they end up doing. So it's like they have so much advantages, and it's so unfair, really, and anti-democratic. But I do want to bring up Lori Goldstein. So she's the one that's been selected to replace Shannon Bird. There's a good social media account out there. If people are on X, follow TT at Government Grifters, and of course all these links at freestatecolorado.com, including Sherrie's great article, which you definitely got to read. But Goldstein, this account on Twitter looked up her campaign contributions. So Goldstein has contributed over $100,000 to Democrats, $100,000 with over 500 donations, and a lot of it, I think most of it's not even in state. It's like outside of Colorado. I mean, total party insider, as you mentioned, current president of the Adams 12 five-star schools Board of Education. So I mean, total insider. I mean, a total activist, really. But people are on social media were saying, "Oh, this is how you do it in Colorado. You spend $100,000 supporting Democrats, and then when your term comes up, hey, she's a good member of the team. She's playing ball and helping us all get elected, and let's put her in that position without her having to spend $100,000 on a campaign." I mean, isn't that?
Right.
I mean, what do you think about all that?
Well, all those people that she has supported in the past will now support her. I mean, she has built a reputation for herself as being a true blue blood, and they're going to come out and they're going to help her because we all know the Democrats are coming for this midterm election like there's no tomorrow, and they want the supermajority back in the House, and they want it in the Senate. This election is going to be super telling for Colorado because if we end up with a Democrat governor and a supermajority in one of the two branches of legislature, you're all going to be my neighbors in Wyoming before the end of next year. That's my prediction.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I really appreciate your prediction too, Sherrie, for this year's legislative session, because as you said, Jared Polis, I don't think he's gonna be more maybe bold in some of his beliefs in terms of, hey, I'm gonna veto this. It's my last year in here. I'm not gonna have to hold back in terms of working with the legislature quite as much. He can be a little bit more forthright in terms of his own personal beliefs because he's going to be done. So he might as well do everything he wants to see done instead of working with the legislature, which he would have to work for years, like in years past, right? And then,
Mhm.
of course, if he's moving to the middle, if he's got other future ambitions, if he's got other ideas, then that'll be very interesting and very telling to see. But I'm really hopeful that what you said is accurate, that the legislature themselves are not going to be as extreme. But, as we kind of wrap it up here, any other predictions for the 2026 legislative session?
I don't know so much for the legislative session, but my brain just stirred a thought because I was having this conversation with somebody the other day about Polis and his ambitions and stuff. And, you know, what if Michael Bennet becomes governor of Colorado? then what do we have going on at the senatorial level for the United States Senate? Now we have an open U.S. Senate seat. Well, Polis has been there before. You know, he was a congressman, and he, he I just yeah again, the rotating musical chairs going on. You know what I mean? It wouldn't surprise me if one of his ambitions isn't to fulfill Michael Bennett's seat, so that when that's over, now he's in DC and he's building his new train of supporters, you know, because he's moved to the middle so much that when 2028 rolls around, or 2026 rolls around, no, 2028 rolls around, he's running for president. We all know he's already reserved those website addresses. But as far as this legislative session goes, I think there's going to be more consternation between the two parties, because they're all campaigning, especially in the House, you know, where they're all campaigning. I think they're going to come at, I hate to say it, but I think they're going to come at Dan Woog's seat. They're going to come at Rebecca Kelty's seat, and they're going to come at Ryan Gonzalez's seat, because those are the three seats that they lost that got them to lose the House of Representatives supermajority in the first place. So I think those are three seats that the Democrats are super targeting, although their two candidates in House District 50 are about as weak as they get, but that's another story. And I also think that they're going to be pushing a little bit harder in some more of the more neutral, more center senatorial districts, because they want that supermajority in the Senate as well. The more irrelevant that they can make the Republican Party in Colorado, the better off they're going to be. And holding both, I don't think anybody in the Democrat Party at all thinks that there's going to be a Republican governor. I really hope that's wrong, but I know the Democrat Party is so bold to think that there's no way they're going to lose the governor's office. So if they can come away with a Democrat governor and supermajorities in both chambers, the Republican Party in Colorado has become absolutely 100% irrelevant, and it won't matter. The Republicans won't be able to do a darn thing to stop them from doing anything, anything. And they'll make California look like Texas.
Wow. Yes, the stakes are high this year, that's for sure. I think it all starts here with the legislative session, paying attention, especially those vulnerable Democrats, and really trying to keep track of their records, seeing the mistakes they made, hopefully some hot mic issues or anything like that, but really tracking that legislation and those votes. And then 2026 election come November, it's going to be a big one, and it's an
Yeah.
incredible opportunity. I'm optimistic and hopeful, but it's all gonna depend on if there's enough people willing to put in the work to get out there and actually get involved with their local elections. Like you said, not even focusing on the big stuff, but even their precincts, right, and their House districts and their Senate districts, and and then more local than that, even if there's anything up there, but county races and things like that. That's really going to determine the future of the state. But Sherrie, I really appreciate you taking the time to share this. Really appreciate all your good work. What other final thoughts to leave people with?
Just vote. I can't say vote enough. It's not enough just to have an opinion, but you got to be out there voting. And I don't care if it is the general election in November, if it's the primary election in June, if it's your local caucus, if it's a special election, which we all know is coming up in Greeley in a few weeks. You need to be out there. You need to be out there voting one way or another, because that's the only way that you truly have a voice. And the other thing is, when you pay attention to what's going on down at the State House and voice your opinion. We've all seen where when we have been able to stop really bad legislation, it's because it's been stopped most of the time in committee, because people have shown up to testify by the hundreds, and sometimes in a couple of cases over 1,000, and they have gone into the night, 2 and 3 days worth of testimony, and that pushing back is really the one voice that we have. And so more people, and you can do it now online, you can do it over the phone. If you live in the far remote corner of Colorado, you can still testify because you can do it remotely. So people need to just take a little bit of that time out of their life and really pay attention to what's going on down at the Gold Dome.
Wonderful, well said. And people, everybody, read Sherrie Peif's articles. Check out Complete Colorado every day. Become informed. Know what's happening. And Sherrie, really appreciate you. Hope to talk to you again
Yeah.
soon. Take
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Brandon. See you later.
awesome.